Well, the latest is that the yes case ain't looking too good. Almost unsalvageable, Rita, according to a new poll for the yes vote for The Voice.
Well, this polling is fascinating, showing the yes vote failing in every state. And as we predicted here, even Victoria, even the good old state of Victoria right now, according to this poll, is voting no, and quite strongly no. And one of the more interesting aspects of the polling was that after hearing the yes and the no cases, 1 in 4 people who said they were leaning towards a yes switched to a no. So this is after being informed of both arguments presented by both sides. That, I think, is a key thing, because I think the more informed you are, the more red flags are raised, because it's very clear what we're being asked to do here. And this isn't about recognition. This is about enshrining racial privilege into the Constitution.
What a shock, James, that you let people know things and they make up their own minds. What's that called again? Oh, yes, democracy.
Yeah,
Silly
but you know,
me.
guys, I think a lot of people actually have a big problem with democracy, and they're going to have an even bigger problem with democracy if the vote goes down no, which it looks like it's going to at this point. And it's interesting to note a few things. Number one, this poll is conducted by Redbridge, which employs people like Kos Samaras, who is that Victorian pollster guy. So, you know, no one can say that this is some right-wing outfit that's putting this poll out there. Number two, the really interesting thing about the poll results is if you go through by demographic group, it's almost a carbon copy of what happened with the Republic vote. And it's pretty much only the highly educated on more than $200,000 a year who are tipping in the majority for yes, and that's only at 51 to 49%. But I think the really interesting thing here, we're already starting to see here, and let this show be your early warning system for this and so much else. We're already seeing this line that the no pamphlet and the no campaign is based on misinformation. You know, that word about the narrative.
Bring in ACMA.
I think Marcia Langton was in there, the Oz on that this weekend, and we're seeing this elsewhere. They're saying that, oh, well, you know, that's all misinformation. And it's really interesting because in the polling numbers, Rita and Rowan, you look at the polling numbers, people are much more firmly attached to no than they are to yes, which tells you something. But if this vote goes no, I can predict that you will see an almost sort of anti-Trumpian sort of reaction against free speech, against democracy, against, you know, what you're allowed to say. You're going to see ACMA and you're going to see the E-Safety Commissioner empowered to basically censor anything that goes against the government line because, of course, you know, that will be wrong and misinformation and bigotry and all of that stuff, which, of course, is nonsense.
That's where we need the coalition to be strong. We cannot have the coalition go to water because, yes, there is going to be this tantrum post the referendum that we saw with Brexit vote, we saw with Trump, and we're going to see it here. They're already having a tantrum, but it's so much projection in everything they say. So much of what they say about misinformation and disinformation actually applies to their side. And we've seen that this week with the Prime Minister getting himself into all sorts of trouble because this is a man who has for years advocated for a treaty. He has pledged a treaty. As late as I played some footage of him from 2021 in Parliament where he stood up pledging for a treaty.
I can beat that.
He's tweeted that repeatedly, and yet he wants to pretend this is just some T-shirt he wore to a rock concert or some ancient thing when he was a young activist. No, this is his position, and at Gama he still mentioned treaty. So this is a man who, when talking to the masses, presents this as some minor change, just recognition, just a polite little change. But when he's talking to the activist class, when he's talking to his own people, it's a very different story.
Well, I can beat this, Rita, because this week in the Daily Telegraph, I wrote a story all about how all the way back in 1986, when he was 23 and a young activist at Sydney Uni, Anthony Albanese signed a big open letter from the broad left coalition calling for reparations, handing back land, sovereignty, all sorts of other things. You know, the radical voice, or, you know, voice plus agenda, I guess you would call it, that we see from activists today. And I'll tell you what, the Prime Minister was not happy about this news story. In fact, actually, guys, it got a little mention on the floor of Parliament.
Ooh.
I did note the Leader of the Opposition's reference in an article today by that investigative journalist, James Morrow.
So he's not particularly thrilled here that
Investigative
people.
journalism. He was mocking your credentials.
No,
You should take
it's going to be on my
offence.
business card now.
He's pretending this is back when he was a young activist in his 20s. No. This is something he has pledged as recently in writing a couple of years ago. So to pretend this is ancient history, to pretend this is just, someone handed me a Midnight Oil T-shirt at a Midnight Oil concert, that's all that treaty was. No, this is part of the Uluru Statement from the Heart. We've told you this here for months. If you actually read the statement, it's very clear. It's a militant statement. It's an activist statement. After the voice comes truth-telling, comes treaty. And it is part of the agenda.
They are inextricably linked, and they are all designed to follow almost a set of dominoes. Once you've got the voice up, bang, the rest follows very easily because you now have this constitutional mechanism. Shortly, we'll be chatting to Tony Seabrook about a great victory for this program, I must say. And for Tony, there in Western Australia, it does appear that the West Australian Aboriginal Cultural Heritage Act laws, which we revealed here on the show a month ago, are going to be repealed. That's the word now. So we'll be chatting to Tony about that. Great victory. But of course, that could only happen because it's not in the Constitution. So you see, if the voice were in the Constitution, you couldn't, if it turned out to be a disaster like the WA cultural heritage laws, you can't turn around. Once the voice is in the Constitution, that's it for all time. You can never get rid of it without another referendum, Rita.